Hello, and welcome to the Women in Motorsport program. As always, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your investment in the Grid Network, no matter the size, plays a crucial role in our mission to promote women in motorsport. You can make a difference by clicking on the link in the video description, or you can always opt to do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chats. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share with family and friends who enjoy motorsports. Now, Ben, let's get this show on the road and start off with the Formula One Academy.
Thank you, Isha. And yes, only 2 drivers remain mathematically eligible for the second F1 Academy Championship, but it's a 95-point gap with only 112 points left on offer for 4 race wins, poles, and fastest laps. Abbi Pulling swept the Singapore weekend. Dorian Penn could only get 2 third-place finishes, though she did pick up the fastest lap in race 1. That was the only point that Pulling dropped all weekend, so she is still in prime position to clinch the championship as soon as race 1 of 2 in Qatar when the series returns in a couple of months. So, Isha, at the start of the season, Dorian Penn was the heavy title favorite, I think, among a lot of F1 Academy viewers. So in light of that, would you consider Abbi Pulling kind of an upset champion, or do you think that's unfair given how incredibly dominant she's been so far this year?
Yeah, I think it's unfair. I think she's had an amazing season. Obviously, we know back in Jeddah how disappointing it was for Dorian Pin to lose that win in the circumstances. But the remainder of the season, Abbi Pulling has just turned it her own. Obviously that first race in Jeddah was a little bit difficult for people, especially for those who all thought that Dorian Pin would be the favorite. Um, for the championship, but then you have to look at the other races that we've had this season, right? Miami, Pulling won both races. Singapore, I think it was her best weekend so far. She won both races in Singapore, led every lap. She qualified on pole for both races and converted that into win. And she's got an amazing cushion too. And so I just think that, it's unfair. Obviously, Jeddah does cloud a little bit of her championship efforts, but she's paved her own way. And I don't think that it's fair to call her the upset champion. I think that she's done an exceptional performance. And yeah, I'm just excited to see how the rest of the season goes.
Well, Dorian Penn, regardless, is still seen as one of the best young talents, particularly in sports car racing, which granted is quite different from open wheel racing in many respects. But a lot of people, like I mentioned, did still look at her success and think that she'd be the championship favorite in light of that. So we don't know what really anybody's 2025 plans are going to be set in stone here just yet. But assuming Dorian Penn is back in F1 Academy next year, do you think she'll be the title favorite for real this time, given that Abbi Pulling will ideally be somewhere else?
Yes, I think so. Obviously that's what we thought at the start of this season too, and then we saw how things changed so quickly. But I think that with, if Abbi Pulling wins this season, which seems very, very likely, and then she'd be obviously out of the F1 Academy for 2025, I think it goes to Dorian Pin. But however, I think that does put a lot of pressure on her because she knows that most people would be looking at her to be the champion for 2025. That is if she's in the F1 Academy. But as of now, I think it is safe to assume that she would be the heavy favorite going into the new year.
Well, there are only 3 races that Pulling hasn't won this season. Dorian Penn won 2 of them. The third was won by one of the young American drivers who was perhaps a little bit under the radar before the season started, but now Chloe Chambers and Lia Block, I think, have certainly made a name for themselves given their results so far this season. As I mentioned, Chambers picked up that race win. She's the only driver not named Abbi Pulling or Dorian Penn to have a win this year in F1 Academy, and as a result, she's 4th in the Drivers' Championship, and she could still finish as high as 2nd if Penn has some bad luck in the final 2 rounds. But Lia Block also had a great weekend in Singapore, finishing 4th in both races. That propelled her up to 8th in the championship, and she was actually only 0.2 of a second away from a podium in the opening race because Dorian Penn had a 5-second penalty. She ultimately opened up a 5.2-second gap, so she did hang on to that 3rd-place finish. But nonetheless, still a great result for Lia Block, Isha, in these 2 races here, 4th place on the road. In both of them. How big of a statement was that for the Williams Academy driver as she looks to further her career in open wheel racing?
Oh, I think it was very big. It was very nice to see her have these 2 solid races in Singapore, as you mentioned. I remember at the start of the season when it was announced that she would be racing for the Formula One Academy, everybody was very excited, especially given, her family history. And so I think it's amazing to see her put in a good weekend. 8th place in the championship is a very good place to be. You're still in the top 10. And so I think that, I hope that the rest of the season she's able to keep up this performance and that she finishes the season off on a good note as well. And I think that, next season, if she's still racing for Formula One Academy, we could see better things from her as well.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Leah's performance, and like you mentioned, Isha, I think there was a little bit of hype surrounding her coming into the year, given she does come from a racing family, but obviously this is something radically different from what her late father Ken Block was famous for with his rallying and everything, and kind of surprising that Lia Block was racing this year, given that I think a lot of people expected her to follow a similar path, and she still might go down that path. We'll see what her future career holds here, but if she is trying to break into the open wheel racing world, I think she's taken a very solid first step this year and has noticeably improved her pace from where it was the start of the year, and been able to close the deal out a little bit better here in Singapore as well to have that pace and then be able to come home with fourth place finishes and move up the standings a little bit. I think is a great result for her. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll keep an eye on the rest of the series. We've got some time off here, a couple of months, like I mentioned, but then we have a double header of sorts here, two races, two races per weekend, obviously, but two rounds in back-to-back weeks with Qatar and Abu Dhabi in late November and early December to finish up the year. And of course, like I mentioned, Abbi Pulling will want to wrap up the F1 Academy title as soon as possible and announce her 2025 plans. So we'll keep an eye out on that. But in the meantime, Isha, let's shift gears now over to the ARCA Menards Series, a couple of races to catch up on over there.
Yes, Ben, that's right. It has been a rough 2 weeks for Amber Balkin and Tony Bredinger in ARCA. Starting in Watkins Glen, Bredinger had an unfortunate leg injury and had to step out of the car during the race. She scored 17th place while Balkin was unable to take the green flag and was credited with 29th place. Then Ben, the series visited Bristol Motor Speedway, which is an intense short track for the ARCA drivers. Logan Misuraka was also in the field at Bristol, and unfortunately, it was a rough return to the series for her. The day ended when she and Balkin made contact. Misuraka hit the wall and came down, and ARCA East title favorite Connor Zilish had nowhere to go. So, Ben, I want to ask you, was the contact between Amber and Logan hard racing, or do you think it was too early on to race that hard?
Yeah, I talked about this a lot on Encore on Monday, and I think it's in hindsight good that we didn't try to squeeze a show in between the ARCA and truck race at Bristol last Thursday, because there was some additional fallout from that. Logan Misraka put some notes up on her Instagram, kind of giving her side of the story. And like I mentioned, I talked a lot on Encore this week. You can go check out the stream highlights from there if you want some more in-depth thoughts on everything exactly that went down, but I'll just, mostly echo what I said here. My opinion hasn't changed. I think, it was a racing incident at best. And if anything, I thought Amber Balkin came down the track a little bit. Logan Misraka, I think, absolutely had a right to be frustrated, given that wasn't the first incident between the two of them in that race alone. Balkin had gotten into Misraka and spun her out for a previous caution. And then the two of them came together again. Obviously, that led to terminal damage for Misraka. And unfortunately, and I say that it could have just easily been anybody else, but it does make it an even more unfortunate incident that it played a role in deciding the ARCA Menards Series East champion. This was a combo race between the main ARCA Series and ARCA East, their finale for the year. Connor Zilic looked like all he had to do was survive to win the championship. He ended up getting caught up in that deal as well, and that handed the title over to William Sawalich, who went on to win the race. So just a very, very unfortunate set of circumstances there. I hope that Amber and Logan have been able to talk it over, because, again, if you saw Logan's Instagram stories and posts on Friday, she was not too happy with Amber Balkin and said it was a shame that, we struggle sometimes. She's speaking from her own perspective here, struggling to get support from their male counterparts in motor racing. A lot of times it was disappointing in her view to not get that from a female counterpart as well in Amber Balkin. So I hope that this isn't the end for Logan Misraka, because, like I mentioned, she had to just, work so hard just to get this one race under her belt to make a return to the series this year. So hopefully she can get another opportunity down the road and get another chance to race Amber Balkin, and hopefully it won't end in a similar manner the next time we see the two of them out on track.
Yes, it was quite an unfortunate incident for all who were involved, and the final result saw Logan in 27th and Amber in 25th, while Tony came home in 12th place. Now, Tony is fourth in the point standings, and Amber is sixth with 2 races remaining. Kansas Speedway and the short track at Toledo close out the season. So, Ben, is Kansas the last opportunity for Tony or Amber to claim a win?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say Kansas, particularly in light of Tony Bridinger's career best third place finish there last year. But even then, and this is not a slight against Tony Bridinger by any means, but when Tony Bridinger had that third place finish, she still got lapped with a couple of laps to go. And again, that's nothing against Tony, but that's more just a current state of the ARCA Menards Series, we joke on Encore all the time. We should just rename it the 18 and 28 Series because, it's primarily been William Sawalich and Connor Zilic in those cars. But no matter who's been in them, there's only been a couple of races this year that drivers outside of those two teams have won. So, just looking past Tony and Amber for a second, Andres Perez is on his way, it appears, to winning the championship. He might not win a race this year. His teammate LeVar Scott might not win a race. We could have a situation where no full-time drivers in ARCA, Chris Wright, the third full-time Venturini driver as well, have made it to victory lane by the end of the year. We're 90% of the way through the season. I can't recall a time in history, at least not in recent history, where that's happened. Maybe Charlie Crawl could open the ARCA history books and point us to something. I don't know, but really kind of an unprecedented situation from what I can remember, having these young part-time drivers who aren't even old enough to run the mile and a halfs like Kansas yet, coming in here and just taking so many of the wins. I'm just looking at the standings right now. William Sawalich is 10th in points despite having missed 5 races, and it's really more races worth of points than that because in ARCA you get a 50-point bonus for every 5 consecutive races you run. Obviously, Sawalich being part-time hasn't been receiving very many of those bonuses, so that just speaks to how dominant he's been, and Connor Zilic as well in the starts that he's had. So I don't know. I think it's probably going to be a long shot for not just Tony or Amber, but any full-time driver to win at this point. But you never know. The Venturini cars will certainly have speed, and we will have Isabella Robusto making her Speedway debut. I guess it'll be later tonight by the time everybody's watching this here at Kansas as well. So I'm very interested to see how she's going to adapt to a track like this. But I got to tell you, Isha, given how strong Isabella Robusto has looked so far this year in her limited attempts, I think of those 3 drivers, I would actually put my money on Isabella Robusto out of the 3 of them as the most likely to perhaps shock the world and take a win here. I think she's been that impressive and probably should have won a couple of West races by now already in the starts that she's had for Venturini this year. But again, you never know. We'll see how it turns out. But those are my predictions heading into the final couple of races of the year. I think it's going to be the same song and dance you've seen all season. Those same 2 cars are going to be very tough to beat, regardless of who we're talking about here.
All right, Ben, now with those predictions, let's turn towards highlighting some other women who were racing this past weekend. On Saturday, Jamie Sullivan in Monster Mutt Dalmatian won Monster Jam's freestyle competition in Rosemont, Illinois. She also won the Skills Challenge on that same night. Michaela Tulachka was also in the field in the Megalodon truck. Abby Eaton made the Porsche Carrera Cup Great Britain history as the first female to take the pole and the first female to win their race. It was an outstanding performance from her in the Pro-Am class. Now, the NHRA Carolina National last weekend had several females in the field. Brittany Forrest was the top qualifying in Top Fuel, but did not advance out of round 2. Erica Enders was fastest in Pro Stock, but was eliminated in the semifinals. Both drivers and Alexa DeHoria in Funny Car have clinched a spot in the NHRA countdown. Now, Regina Servent in the NASCAR Mexico Series playoffs race unfortunately DNF'd early, and mechanical issues took her out of the Querétaro 200 on Sunday. Now, that's all for today's show. Ben, I'll hand it over to you for our closing.
Thank you, Isha. Good to be back and catch up on some of the women in motorsports that we've been tracking all year, and we'll continue to do that as we get to the end of the 2024 season. In the meantime, if you're looking for some racing this weekend, the World Rally Championship is underway. MotoGP back this weekend as well, and of course, NASCAR will be in Kansas, not just for the Cup Series, but also the ARCA Menards Series as well. So you can catch 3 female drivers for Venturini Motorsports in that race. Again, if you're watching this, it's later tonight. As we're taping it, it's tomorrow, but Friday afternoon/evening at Kansas, you'll see them. And Rita Goulet will be back in the 31 car, co-owned by her husband, Tim, as well. So we'll keep an eye on them, and we'll be back in the next couple of weeks here to recap how their races go. And in the meantime, you can stay tuned for our Grid Live programs coming up this weekend. And I'll be back on Monday night with Grid Encore to recap some of the undercard races as well. So thank you all so much for tuning into the Women in Motorsports program. For Isha Azim, I'm Ben Schneider. We'll see you next time. Have a good rest of your week, everybody.